I lived with a secret that I had no right to know. But one day it did come to me, and I paid a high price for it. The outcome will shock you. Listen carefully. Emma disappears, leaving behind more than she intended. The day Emma vanished was a Friday, the kind that tricked you with sunshine in the morning and bone-cold wind by late afternoon. I remember because the light in our bedroom had hit her side of the bed just right, highlighting a tiny scratch on her nightstand. She'd left it cluttered, unusual for her, a bottle of lavender pills without a cap, a crumpled receipt from a boutique hotel downtown, and her Apple Watch blinking like it was trying to warn me. She was already gone when I noticed all of this. No note, no message, just vanished. The first day I made excuses for her. Maybe she needed space. Maybe she was with her sister, though she hadn't spoken to Lisa in months. Day 2, I started calling hospitals, her friends, her mother. I got nothing but confusion and shrugged apologies. Day 3, something shifted in my gut. I stopped worrying and started watching. It wasn't until I tapped the Find My app that the spiral truly began. I didn't expect to see anything, maybe a location error or a dead battery, but there it was, a glowing green dot pulsing gently over a property I knew too well. Jeff's house, our family friend, my fishing buddy, my son's godfather. I stared at the screen like it would change. It didn't. She'd been there for 3 nights in a row. I remember the sound of the furnace clicking on as I sat in the silence, holding that blinking betrayal in my palm. Jeff's place wasn't just a house. It was a mansion tucked into a hillside, gated, with heated driveways and motion-activated lights. I'd helped him move in after his second divorce, brought beers, carried boxes. We joked about how quiet it must be up there. Guess it wasn't that quiet anymore. I spent that night doing something I hadn't done in years, scrolling through Emma's Instagram. Pictures I'd liked before, without a second thought, now dripped with subtext. A wine glass clinked between hers and Jeff's, her hand on his shoulder at our kids' school play. Comments like, "Always a rockin' tough times," that used to seem innocent now felt like screams I'd been too deaf to hear. That third night, I sat in the kitchen for hours, just waiting. Around 2:12 a.m., headlights lit up the driveway. She came in quietly, keys jangling like they'd never betrayed a damn thing. She didn't look broken or shaken or like someone who'd been through a mental health spiral. She looked fresh, maybe a little tired, but calm. When she caught me watching her from the hallway, she gave a small smile, said she'd needed to reset. I didn't say a word. My mouth went dry, like my own body didn't trust me to speak without giving something away. She went straight to bed, slipping under the covers with the practiced comfort of someone who thought I still didn't know. I didn't sleep. I stayed in the doorway, out of her view, heart hammering while my brain scraped every second of the last 12 years for signs I'd missed. The next morning, she made coffee like nothing had happened. She asked if I'd mind if Jeff came over for dinner, said he'd helped her think through some stuff during her dark few days. I said sure, of course. Why not? My mouth smiled while my fingers dug into the wooden table hard enough to leave crescent-shaped dents. That night, I watched our son fold napkins for the dinner table, an odd little habit he'd picked up recently. Precise, almost ceremonial. And I saw it, the way he folded once, then again, then tucked the corners. Jeff did the same damn thing every time we grilled steaks at his place. The same rhythm, the same final press of the thumb. My throat clenched. After they went to bed, I went into the closet and dug through a travel kit we kept for guests. Found an old toothbrush, blue handle, worn bristles. I sealed it in a Ziploc and sat on the bathroom floor for half an hour, just holding it. I didn't know if I was shaking because I was cold, or if my body was reacting to a truth my mind hadn't let in yet. The next morning, I paid extra for overnight shipping. No return address, no label that could be traced back. I sent it to a lab out of state, some discreet place I'd found at 3 a.m. on a conspiracy form. I told myself it was just to quiet the noise in my head, but deep down, I already knew what the results would say. The envelope looked like any other, white, boring, clinical. It came on a Tuesday, wedged between a car wash coupon and a catalog for kitchen upgrades. I stared at it for 10 minutes before I even touched it. When I finally did, my hands moved too quickly, like tearing off a Band-Aid. But what was inside wasn't a sting. It was an explosion. The lab had printed the results in black and white. No fluff, no room for misinterpretation. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. I read it again. Then again. Still zero. Still not mine. My fingers pressed into the paper until it crumpled. Something inside me shifted, like gears grinding against bone. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger was still a room I couldn't access. What I felt was colder, heavier, like being buried alive in wet cement. I walked down to the basement, that half-finished space with the stained couch and dusty treadmill we never used. The air felt thick down there. I flicked on the projector and loaded old videos from our son's birthdays. There he was, grinning with cake on his face, smearing icing on Emma's nose while she laughed like life was perfect. In one of the videos from his 5th birthday, the camera jerked sideways, probably me, adjusting the tripod, and caught something in the background. Jeff, standing in the garage doorway, one hand gripping Emma's shoulder in a way that didn't look platonic. His fingers pressed into her skin like they belonged there. Her head tilted toward him slightly, like they'd forgotten anyone else existed for a second. I paused the video, stared, rewound, played it again. Same thing. That was the moment everything inside me hardened. The videos weren't memories anymore. They were evidence. I hadn't just been blind. I'd been deliberately distracted. I started to replay every conversation, every shared look, every time Jeff offered to pick up our son from school or bring over food when Emma was under the weather. The bastard had been slipping into my life like a shadow. I didn't sleep that night, just sat down there in the dark with birthday songs echoing faintly from the speakers. And somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m., an idea began to form. Not fully shaped, not yet a plan, but more like a stage direction. I wouldn't scream, wouldn't throw things, wouldn't even confront them, not yet. I'd do what they never expected. I'd play the part of the loving, trusting husband. I'd act. Over the next few days, I crafted the perfect opening move. I met with Jeff under the pretense of needing advice. Something about diversifying savings, tapping into green tech, all buzzwords that stroked his ego. I knew him too well. He loved being the smart one in the room, the visionary. I fed it to him in careful doses, hinting at this biofertilizer startup I'd been researching. Something that could revolutionize the ag sector. It didn't matter that I barely knew what it meant. I'd make it sound real. Real enough to bait a man like Jeff. To my fake surprise, he lit up like Christmas. Started talking about capital pipelines and influencer farming. I smiled and nodded, pretending to jot things down in a leather notebook I bought just for this farce. By the time we finished that lunch meeting, he was already pitching names for the podcast we'd start to build a presence. When I came home that evening, Emma was on the couch, laptop open, researching school trip options. She looked up and smiled when I walked in. I smiled back, sat next to her, put my hand on her thigh like everything was exactly as it used to be. "Guess who I had lunch with?" I said. "Jeff?" "Yeah. We're going to do a business thing. Real potential." She paused just for a fraction of a second, like her brain hit a glitch. Then she smiled again. "That's amazing, babe. I'm proud of you." I kissed her forehead, said thanks. Inside, I was already rehearsing the next scene. A week later, the podcast went live. Nothing big, just a teaser episode about sustainability and humor in agriculture. But it picked up traction fast. Jeff had connections, and I leaned in hard. Brought in local farmer influencers, rented equipment, even booked studio time. I wasn't building a company. I was building a stage. Every interview, every shout out, every TikTok where I clapped Jeff on the back and thanked him for having my back. It was all part of the script. Emma watched it all unfold from the sidelines with a gleam in her eye, like the world was finally returning to normal. She even posted a photo of me and Jeff with the caption, "True friends are rare. Lucky to have both of you in my life." I liked the post, heart emoji and all. The comments poured in. People adored us. A power trio, they called it. Some said it was inspiring. Others joked about how Jeff should just move in already. I laughed with them, smiled through my teeth. Meanwhile, I was charting every step, every smile, every subtle twitch that might betray them, because I already knew what came next. And this time, it was going to be my secret they wouldn't see coming. The thing about pretending to be fine is that eventually people believe it. The more I smiled in public, the more they stopped asking questions. Emma especially. She was almost too eager to buy into it, the new narrative where her husband had bounced back, thrown himself into an entrepreneurial wave, and bonded even closer with their oldest family friend. She wasn't suspicious, she was relieved. That told me everything. The podcast was gaining steam. We had sponsors now, local feed stores, niche eco-farmers, even a startup app for crop monitoring. Jeff had never felt more relevant in his life. He started dressing better, wearing more fitted shirts, getting haircuts twice a month. I let him shine. In interviews, I played the straight man to his visionary. I thanked him constantly, called him the heart behind the scenes. I watched him glow under the praise like a child under Christmas lights. Emma loved the attention. She started calling us the duo, even made us matching mugs. I drank from mine every morning while planning his downfall in silence. What they didn't realize was that this wasn't just a business. It was a stage. And on this stage, every interaction was a setup. Every smiling photo, a chess move. I began placing breadcrumbs, little details in posts and podcast episodes that painted Jeff as the emotional support system for our family. A few carefully edited clips even hinted that Emma was the one who encouraged the partnership, that it was her idea all along to bring Jeff into our home life. The public lapped it up. One afternoon, while Emma was out running errands, I went back down to the basement, my planning room. I queued up old text backups on my laptop, the ones I'd archived just in case. And there it was, a string of messages from Emma's old phone. Most of it benign, grocery lists, weekend plans, PTA gossip, but buried deep, a thread between her and Lisa, her estranged sister. One message stuck out. I know I shouldn't, but Jeff makes me feel seen again. I haven't told Harry. I don't know if I ever will. That was dated 2 years ago. 2 years they'd been playing me for a fool. I shut the laptop, sat in the silence. My reflection stared back at me from the black screen, like a stranger I wasn't sure I could trust anymore. The next morning, I ordered a custom check for $50,000. I wanted it to look as dramatic as possible. Bold serif font, ceremonial script at the bottom that read, "In honor of unwavering support." I called Emma and told her I wanted to present it at the upcoming charity gala she chaired every year. The same one where she always gave a speech about loyalty and community and showing up when it counts. She nearly cried over the phone. Thank you, Harry. You've always been so generous, even when I didn't deserve it." That line stuck with me longer than it should have. The night of the gala, I wore a tailored suit and smiled through the entire evening like I was hosting a reunion of my best friends. Jeff was beside me, radiating charm, his hand resting a little too long on Emma's lower back between photos. She laughed too easily. Cameras flashed around us as if this were the story everyone wanted to see. The resilient family, the selfless friend, the loving wife. I leaned into it. When I handed Emma the oversized check on stage, applause erupted. Phones came out. A photographer from the local press took at least 20 pictures of us smiling, arms around each other, the check raised between us like a trophy. I even kissed her cheek. Jeff clapped the loudest. And just like that, the illusion was complete. But here's the thing about illusions. They don't last forever. The very next day, I made sure the check was cashed. Emma did it from her joint business account, the one she'd opened with a friend she hadn't spoken to in almost a year. The paper trail was sloppy, rushed, the kind of thing that screamed ego and carelessness. I didn't need her to go to prison. I just needed the IRS to ask questions. I filed an anonymous tip with a single paragraph and attached screenshots of the transaction logs I'd intercepted from our shared cloud backup. I timed it all perfectly, right when she thought the spotlight was on her for all the right reasons. 3 days later, the audit notice arrived. She found it before I did, ripped open the envelope at the kitchen island while our son did homework in the next room. Her face went pale, voice wobbling as she tried to make sense of the dense language about account discrepancies and co-ownership responsibilities. I stepped in, playing dumb, even offering to call the bank first thing in the morning. She looked like she wanted to believe me, like she needed to, and I let her. That night, I stayed up late again, listening to recordings from our podcast. I found one episode where Jeff accidentally referred to Emma as our biggest supporter, then quickly corrected himself with a laugh. Subtle. Too subtle for most people to notice. But not me. I knew what came next. The podcast wasn't the end game. It was the misdirection. The real performance was just getting started. And in the background, the walls were starting to shift. Cracks widening. Shadows moving where once there was silence. Soon I would give the world something they couldn't ignore. But first I needed to light the match. The cracks aren't spreading. They're being carved. After the audit notice landed, Emma moved like someone tiptoeing through a minefield she planted herself. She clung to her routine, carpool runs, charity calls, dinner plans, but her smiles no longer reached her eyes. At night, she'd curl beside me and whisper half apologies she never explained. I let her, just nodding and kissing her hair like I was still hers. Meanwhile, Jeff was riding high. He was the podcast's golden boy now, calling himself an agripreneur with a straight face. We were pulling followers in by the thousands, thanks to the illusion of authenticity I helped manufacture. I leaned into the act more than ever, laughing on cue, making him look brilliant. I wasn't building a business anymore. I was building his image just so I could destroy it. We launched a new initiative, a digital course concept that didn't exist. I knew Jeff would jump at it, and he did. I also knew the investor we pitched to, someone I'd prepped, would reject it. The sting hit Jeff hard. I played the calm optimist, feeding his pride like bait. Then came the next move, a TikTok montage thanking Jeff for standing by me in my darkest days. It was vague enough to invite speculation, and that's all I needed. The comments exploded with theories. Emma saw the video while making dinner. Her hands froze mid-chop, her smile faltering before she walked out to the porch, wine glass in hand. She didn't ask questions. She didn't want answers. At our next live stream, someone, planted of course, asked Jeff about sacrifices he'd made for other people's families. He paused just for a second, but it was enough. That hesitation spread like wildfire. Twitter threads popped up comparing old photos, analyzing our chemistry, pointing out how often Jeff appeared in our family life. Emma asked if we should pause the podcast. I told her no. I smiled and said, "We're just getting started." She didn't argue, just nodded and disappeared into another room. And then I dropped the match. I'd been saving an old video from a kid's party, footage that caught Jeff sneaking a quick kiss in the garage with Emma. The angle was grainy, but the moment was unmistakable. I cleaned it up, then quietly forwarded it to a local blogger I knew, someone who'd been circling our feel-good brand for months. The story dropped in less than 2 days. It hit the town like a brick through stained glass. Emma was named, Jeff too. The article hinted at timelines, speculated on motives. Worse, it exposed Emma's role in the company's finances, tying her name to the audit now under federal review. Jeff withdrew from the podcast. Our sponsors pulled out. Emma resigned from the charity board before they could force her out. Gossip flew like ash in every corner of our social circle. Birthday invites stopped. Whispers grew louder. Emma barely spoke anymore. And I made a statement about grace, growth, and second chances on Instagram. Thousands of likes. The performance was working, but the finale hadn't started yet. The ashes hadn't settled, but Harry was already sculpting the next act from the wreckage. The silence that followed the scandal wasn't peace. It was the eye of the storm. Jeff disappeared from the public map entirely. He canceled appearances, deleted his social media, and stopped replying to my messages. I acted concerned, sent him a voicemail saying I missed my brother in arms, and even posted a throwback photo with a caption about brotherhood weathering the harshest seasons. The comments were delicious. Everyone pitied me. Some blamed Emma. Others defended her, saying mistakes happen and the internet shouldn't be judge and jury. But one thing was clear. No one doubted the kiss anymore. No one questioned that something had happened, and now the question had shifted. How much did I know? How long had I been suffering in silence? Let them wonder. Emma, meanwhile, unraveled in slow motion. The charity community cut her off. Her email inbox became a graveyard of rejections and polite severances. She cried more often, but only when she thought I wasn't watching. Sometimes I'd hear her pacing the kitchen at 3 a.m., whispering apologies into the dark like they might reverse time. I never comforted her, just lay in bed with my eyes closed, letting the silence confirm everything she feared. Then came the art idea. It started as a flicker, half memory, half instinct. I remembered an old friend from college, now a gallery curator, who owed me a favor after I helped him through a legal mess a few years back. I reached out, floated the idea of a conceptual exhibit called Consequences. No names, no literal depictions, just emotion translated into texture, sculpture, and light. He was intrigued, said I could have a private space for 2 weeks in the downtown arts district. I went to work. In my garage, I built the centerpiece first, a full-body resin sculpture of a man mid-step, expressionless, arms down, eyes focused on something just beyond reach. I modeled the face subtly, but unmistakably, after Jeff. The clothes I chose were rough cast from fabric I'd taken from one of Jeff's old jackets left in our closet. I molded the posture from memory, precise, calculated. Then came the woman. I shaped her from mesh and gauze, delicate, faceless, but posed in a way that mirrored a photo I had of Emma on our wedding day. Her head was tilted, not in grace, but in avoidance, as if caught mid-step away from something she could never undo. I cut strips from an old dress she once wore to a gala and laced them into the sculpture's gown. Fabric doesn't forget, neither do I. Around the walls I displayed fragments, abstracts made from receipts, shredded texts, screenshots transferred to canvas and scorched at the edges. No names, no dates, just implication. Everyone who mattered would recognize them. The invitation was digital, tastefully vague. A private exploration of betrayal and consequence, told in silence and shadow. I sent it to our social circle, including people who'd once called Emma a sister. I didn't invite Jeff, of course, but I knew he'd hear about it. I made sure the local paper got wind. Their arts columnist even asked for an early preview. I gave her just enough of a quote to light the fuse. Sometimes healing starts when the truth is finally allowed to stand still and be seen. Emma found out about the exhibit 3 days before it opened. She came into the living room with her phone trembling in her hand, voice cracking as she asked, "What is this?" I told her it was just art, a project I'd always wanted to do, a way to process everything. "You're making it public?" she said. I shrugged, told her I wasn't naming names, that if people saw themselves in it, maybe they should ask why. She didn't argue, just walked away. Opening night arrived like thunder. The gallery was full by 7 p.m. Colleagues, donors, artists, curious strangers. They wandered between the installations, murmuring, speculating. Some pointed, some avoided eye contact. I stood near the back, drink in hand, watching reactions unfold like theater. Then she walked in. Emma. She wore black. No makeup, her hair tied back like she was trying to disappear into herself. But she didn't look weak. She looked haunted. Her eyes landed on the central sculpture and locked there. She didn't move for a long time. I saw her chest rise, fall, and then again, like she couldn't breathe. I didn't approach her. I let her walk the full gallery alone. She saw the gauze, the burnt receipts, the caption beneath the sculpture that read, "Not every betrayal ends with fire. Some rot slow in daylight." Near the exit, each guest received a card, simple, white, embossed with one sentence. "Betrayal isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of someone else's shame." I watched her turn the card over in her hands. No name, no explanation, but she understood. Her face crumpled for just a moment. Then she left. She never looked back. But I did, because the final act was coming, and it was going to be beautiful. After the exhibit, the silence between Emma and me wasn't just cold, it was surgical. Every glance was measured, every word a strategic calculation. We shared space like strangers who'd both survived the same fire but blamed each other for the first spark. She didn't ask questions about the gallery afterward. She didn't have to. Everything I needed her to see was already embedded in plaster and steel, immortalized under soft lighting and whispered analysis. But the fallout kept echoing. Her name showed up again in the paper a week later, tied to a second wave of scrutiny around the charity. The audit had opened doors she never meant to be walked through. Now every transaction was under a microscope. The whispers that once followed her in private became columns and captions. Her face, once featured in gala programs and wellness newsletters, had become a cautionary tale. I let her unravel on her own. No support, no conversation, just the routine of a man who'd made peace with betrayal, or so it appeared. But beneath that calm exterior, I was pushing the last dominoes into place. With Jeff gone and Emma's image deteriorating, the podcast came to a quiet end. I made a final episode without Jeff, titled Seasons Change. It wasn't explicit. No names, no bitterness, just metaphors. I talked about crops that never grew, land that looked fertile but never bore fruit. I thanked the listeners, said goodbye with grace, and the audience, God bless them, flooded the comments with sympathy. Some even begged me to stay strong, but I wasn't weak. I was clearing the stage. I redirected the business into something new, an art therapy program tied to emotional recovery through sculpture. The irony was thick, but it landed perfectly. Investors came sniffing around again, the same ones who'd once backed away when the Jeff and Emma scandal cracked wide open. Now they saw me as someone who'd survived pain and turned it into purpose. They wanted that story. People always do. Meanwhile, Emma started asking questions again, but now they were edged with desperation. "Why are people still talking about me?" she asked one morning, holding her phone out like it had personally attacked her. "Why are they still sharing the video?" I shrugged, told her the internet doesn't forget. She stared at me for a long moment, like she finally understood I wasn't the man she thought she'd broken. I wasn't broken at all. I was focused, unblinking. That night, I found her sitting in the living room with an old wedding album in her lap. Her eyes were red. She didn't even try to hide it. "Were you ever going to forgive me?" she asked. I didn't answer. She nodded like she expected that, closed the album slowly, placed it beside her, and whispered, "You were never angry." Still, I didn't respond, because she wasn't wrong. I hadn't been angry. I'd been surgical. Weeks passed. She stopped going out. Friends stopped calling. Her phone rarely buzzed, except for news alerts or charity updates she wasn't a part of anymore. Her world had shrunk into the house, into shadows and silence. And then she got the letter. Not from me, from a lawyer. See, Jeff hadn't just vanished. He'd panicked. In his desperation, he'd tried to sell off part of the startup project we'd created together, even though he legally couldn't. He'd used Emma's name in a document he wasn't supposed to have access to, forged a signature. Now the lawyer representing a silent partner wanted restitution, and her name was directly attached to the contract. I watched her read the letter 3 times. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. And when she finally looked at me, it was the first time in months her eyes didn't hold arrogance or confusion. They held fear, real, gutted fear. I told her I'd talk to the lawyer, that maybe I could fix it. I said it gently, with just enough warmth to sell the act. And she nodded like a child accepting a hand out of the dark. But I had no intention of fixing anything. That document had found its way into the wrong hands by design. The legal fallout wouldn't destroy her completely, but it would bury her credibility deep enough that she'd never climb back out. And she knew it. I watched her begin to understand something she should have realized long ago. This wasn't a mistake she could apologize away. It was a life she no longer owned. The gallery hadn't been the final blow. This was, and still, the final curtain hadn't dropped. The night of the final event, I wore the same black suit I'd worn at our wedding. It still fit. I'd taken care of it, just like I'd taken care of everything else. The podcast, the investments, the image, the lies. Every piece of this twisted puzzle had been carved and sanded smooth by my hand. And now it was time for the last unveiling. The gallery had agreed to host my second exhibit, a follow-up to Consequences, this one titled simply Reckoning. It was private, by invitation only, and everyone who got one understood what it meant. The guest list was short, friends who hadn't seen us in months, The journalist who'd broken the original scandal, a few of Emma's former charity contacts, and people who had once called Jeff visionary. No one declined. Everyone wanted closure. But this wasn't closure. This was my conclusion. At the center of the room was the new sculpture, a towering piece, 10 feet tall, cold, metallic, jagged. It depicted a man, arms outstretched, with one hand offering a wedding band and the other holding it behind his back. His face was fractured down the middle, half serene, half crumbling. In front of him, a child's toy sat on the floor, a folded napkin. The crowd moved slowly through the space, silent, reverent. And then they came to the video installation, a looping reel projected onto translucent silk, showing moments from my old home videos. No sound, just imagery. Emma brushing Jeff's arm during a backyard barbecue. Jeff adjusting our son's collar with too much care. Emma blinking too slowly after laughing at something Jeff whispered. All the subtleties no one had seen before. All the proof I'd quietly archived over the years. And then, the kiss. Looping. Not grainy anymore. Clear. Undeniable. Whispers filled the space like smoke. Emma entered 20 minutes late. She looked thinner. Her hair was down. Her eyes, rimmed and dark, darted across the room as if trying to find an exit. But there wasn't one. Not from this. She moved slowly, pretending composure, though I knew she felt every stare. When she reached the main sculpture, she stopped. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, frozen like she'd stepped into a dream that had become a museum. People began to shift away from her, unsure what to say. Sympathy turned to unease. Respect faded into discomfort. No one wanted to stand next to the exhibit anymore. Not after realizing it wasn't abstract. It was her. She didn't look at me until the end. When most guests had gone, she approached quietly. The gallery lights had dimmed, casting us both in a soft blue haze. She stood in front of me for a long time before she spoke. "You planned every second of this," she whispered. "All of it." I nodded. She waited, maybe hoping for anger, a scream, something to ground her in familiar conflict. But I didn't give her that. Instead, I pulled a small envelope from my jacket and handed it to her. No words. Inside was a single sheet of paper. One sentence typed in plain black font. "I loved you until you taught me not to." She read it again. Then for the first time, her mask shattered. Her mouth twisted, and the tears came. Not soft, not pretty, but guttural. Real. Her knees buckled slightly and she caught herself on the edge of the display table. I watched. I didn't flinch. Didn't speak. This wasn't cruelty. This was consequence. Jeff never showed. He'd left the state. Maybe the country. His accounts were frozen. His name now synonymous with fraud and deception. He hadn't just lost a podcast or a friend. He'd lost his illusion of importance. Emma left the gallery alone. No ride, no entourage. Just her in a clutch bag, walking out into the night like someone trying to disappear before the world could notice her again. And me? I stayed, watched the staff lock up, walked once more around the exhibit. Then I stepped out into the cold air, exhaled, and let the silence soak in. The revenge hadn't been loud. It hadn't needed fire or screaming or blood. It had been slow, precise, public, honest. Because in the end, betrayal doesn't demand destruction. It deserves exposure. And I gave it everything. Let her burn in the glow of the truth she tried so hard to bury. Let him vanish into the shadow of the man he pretended to be. And let myself finally go home. Alone. Free. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this, and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.